Hi there. Thanks so much for coming. We're going to get started. I know there's still people coming in. We're just been thrilled with all the interest, and thank you all for coming. My name is Dave Harvey. I'm Executive Director of Park People. Park People supports and mobilizes people to help them activate the power of parks to improve quality of life in cities right across Canada.
I'm Suzanne Cavanaugh, and I'm the co-host with Dave for this afternoon. We've got a pretty tight agenda, but it's also very loose, so just hang in as we work on this.
Good crowd.
It is a great crowd. One of the things that I just wanted to mention before we get started is that when this started a few weeks ago, we were sitting around a dining room table saying, we should do something. And so here we are right now, and I want you to know that we've reached out to several Indigenous peoples, and scheduling and last minute notice, we don't have any formal representation today. However, they are with us in spirit. We are gathered on the traditional lands of the Indigenous peoples, including Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. Here we acknowledge the treaty obligations agreed to between the Mississaugas of the Credit and the Crown in the Toronto Purchase Treaty number 13. We seek to live according to the example of the dish with one spoon, wampum between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe, to share the land, the water, and their resources equitably. We treasure the fact that Toronto is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and we work to learn the truth and practice reconciliation between all Indigenous peoples and more recent settlers living together on Turtle Island.
So, why are we all here? I think many of us were really concerned about the future of Ontario Place ever since it shut down in 2012. It was a bit of a slow process, but we started to see some really great improvements happening, like Trillium Park, the Bill Davis Trail, reopening the Semisphere, and some great new programming that's been happening down there the last couple of years. And there were steps to put in place to put in an exciting new planning process for the future of the site. Then there was a new government at Queen's Park. And they halted that planning process and said there was going to be a new vision for Ontario Place. There's been some rumblings about, potential private development, maybe a casino or something like that. And also the government's appointed a new chair of Ontario Place, who's recently been quoted as saying that the site was, quote, disgraceful, quote, that nothing could be saved, and quote, that it can be rebuilt in any way that Premier Ford wants it to be rebuilt. So, as Suzanne was saying, a few weeks ago, a bunch of us gathered together and thought, let's pull some ideas together, what can be done. So it was a great team at Waterfront for All, partnering with us and Park People, and we put this rally together to come up with some new plans for Ontario Place that ensure that Ontario Place is a park for all Ontarians. Those of us who organized this rally believe that Ontario Place is a vital green connection to Toronto's waterfront, and that Ontario Place must remain a publicly accessible waterfront space. And just as importantly, we fundamentally believe that any changes to Ontario Place have to be part of a thoughtful, comprehensive public review process. But today is just the beginning. You're going to be hearing some great speakers that are going to inspire and educate you, but it's fundamentally the most important thing is what comes out of today's rally. So we need everybody in this room, plus the people in this room, and there's a great group of people down in the rotunda. There's people watching us on live stream. We've been absolutely inundated with people interested in this. The media this week has been incredible. So it's just so much excitement building around the positive future for Ontario Place and people's interest in what can happen there. So we need everybody in this room, everybody who's watching, we need their ideas.
Yes, that's on our agenda. Thanks for coming up.
So we need your ideas. We need your input and energy. We need your contact information to build a network for people of Ontario Place supporters. We need your financial support to sustain an ongoing campaign. We all want to get together and put forward a positive vision for the future of Ontario Place. Couple of quick thank yous. So there was a great core of steering committee members that put this together. There's been a wonderful group of volunteers that have been here for a number of hours already. We've got some great speakers that volunteered as we're over the holiday. We're trying to put this all together. So it's come together very quickly, and we've just been so thrilled by everybody coming. And there's a number of people. We've got some great elected representatives, some of which we're going to speak, have them speak just a little bit later on. But I think we've got Councillor Joe Cressy. Who else is that? I saw MPP Peter Tabbins. MPP Morrison. Anybody else? Just elected representatives?
Norm.
That's and we've got a number of other people who are going to be coming over the course of the afternoon. Again, really appreciate the support.
Back to me.
Yes.
So one of the things that I've been charged with is some of the housekeeping, but I first want to give a plug because somebody's been asking about what is Waterfront for All. And just a very short speech. We are a baby compared to Park People. We were incorporated as a not-for-profit in November of 2018. So I think we're off to a good start. And it started off as an organization of 30 different organizations, all not-for-profits, to take a look at how we can best steward the water's edge, which is 50 kilometers when you go from Etobicoke right over to Scarborough. So just a reminder, as Dave mentioned, we are live streaming, so hello to everybody down on the rotunda. Yes, I can hear you. And also for those of you who have decided to stay home, it's a little warmer, and so thanks so much. So it's very fluid today. If we have more seating up here, we'll ask for volunteers to move you upstairs so you can hang out, and off we go. One of the things that I did want to mention is just a brief overview of the agenda. So first up will be Ken Greenberg, and he's going to give a short, he's been timed to 20 minutes, but a short presentation on the history and vision. And then after that will be Mark Matson to talk about how this place is Toronto's best swimming hole. Karen Carter is going to walk us through an exercise where we get to tell our stories. And then Zara will talk to us about, or lead us through a discussion around what are some of the future visions, what could we do right now. And so as Dave mentioned, we will have some representation. Some of them are here now, but later on, and we met with them earlier, so we said to Adam and to Chris, who's running his levy. Adam's here now, Adam wave. And so Adam, Chris, and Joe, we have charged them with the 1-minute message, which will be later on, so they can work on that and help us out. The other thing is that we will be talking more about the next steps. So again, just a reminder, we are streaming, so anytime you want to say something, we want to hear from you. We're asking you to use the microphone because we are videotaping and we want to make sure that your voice is heard. There's nothing worse than sitting in Barrie, where we've got somebody right now with a 2-month-old on her lap. So we want to make sure that she can hear all of this. There are no official breaks today, so we're going to run right through until 3:30, or I guess a little bit after since we started late. So feel free to come and go in the room as you see fit. And there's going to be a lot of interaction, so I think people have already talked to you about using some of the Post-it notes. There are some blue pails kicking around with a nice smiley face on it. And so throughout the day, if you feel the need, you can donate. So all of this is all driven by volunteers. And we want to make sure that if we can get any support here, we're happy to take your contributions. And then down the road, Dave has also advised that he's happy to use Park People's website for donations. So according to this, we're 5 minutes over time. Oh yes, thank you so much. So on the walls, if you can take a look around, and for those of you at home, We are now, this is something I never would talk about 20 years ago, we're tweeting. And so we've got hashtags out there, and the hashtag for today's event is capital O, capital N, all lowercase place, the digit 4, all, and A is uppercase. And you can see around the room, we've got the media handles for both Park People and Waterfront for All. So please start tweeting and Instagramming and whatever else that you would like to do. All right, so that's it. Now we're going to move on to our next speaker. If I were to go through the full bio for Ken Greenberg, he will be still here tomorrow. So I said, Ken, you know, the shortest bio I could do is that he is Etty Greenberg's husband. Just a short word for people. But my words is that Ken Greenberg has made a significant career conducting urban acupuncture. Sounds painful, but those are his words. Planning and designing the strategic places, projects, and investments that will make a difference in communities. His ideas and plans have shaped many parts of many places. From the Amsterdam waterfront, Brooklyn Bridge Park, Fan Pier in Boston, and downtowns and waterfronts from Charleston, South Carolina, to Paris, to San Juan, Puerto Rico, to Washington, D.C. He is an urban designer, teacher, writer, former director of urban design and architecture for the City of Toronto. He is the recipient of the 2014 Sustainable Buildings Canada Lifetime Achievement Award, and too many to mention. Involved in many grassroots and community initiatives, he has served as a board member of Park People, is currently a director of the Bentway Conservancy Board. He is a co-founder and vice chair of the City Building Institute of Ryerson University. I personally have an autographed copy of Ken's book called Walking Home, Life and Lessons of a City Builder. He played a leading role for the Bentway in the transformation of a major public space under the Gardner Expressway. He has a new book coming out this May called Toronto Reborn, Design and Successes and Challenges. Please welcome fellow board member of Waterfront for All, my friend, Ken Greenberg.
Thank you, Suzanne. I may not be as long as the intro. But it's my, what happened to the clicker? Somebody walked away with it.
It's behind you.
It's my task this afternoon to try and set the stage by providing a little bit of context in time and space. And I'm going to talk about this in terms of ambitions and vulnerabilities for what we now know of as Ontario Place. Just a reminder, it wasn't always there. This is an artificial creation off the edge of the Canadian National Exhibition Grounds, which itself was founded in 1879. So there is a long and storied history to this site, and the big change occurred in response to what happened in Montreal in 1967. Expo 67, and I assume, like me, there are probably a number of people in the room who had the opportunity to visit that site, was a great moment of optimism for Canada. Designers from all across the country came and did extraordinary things, as well as people from all over the world, and it was truly an inspiring event. And in response, the province of Ontario created Ontario Place, opening in 1971, a smaller scale version, to be sure, but one that was very much inspired by that spirit, and engaged in producing Ontario Place were two great designers, incidentally both new Canadians, which is really interesting. Everhard Zeidler, who just turned 93 yesterday. There was a celebration at the Daniels faculty to celebrate his birthday, and a new library for the school that he and his wife have dedicated. And Michael Huff, who unfortunately has passed on, who was one of our great landscape architects, Ed from Germany, Michael from the UK, and together they came up with a composition that I refer to as The Machine in the Garden. That's the title of a book written in 1964 by Leo Marx, a philosopher, and it really speaks to a kind of Canadian, Ontarian spirit of human settlement within a natural setting. Michael's whole emphasis as a landscape architect was on ecology. He was really the leading inspiration that led to the Friends of the Don, Bring Back the Don, the river restoration work that's going on now. And they produced something quite remarkable. This is a handwritten note by Ebb, and I just want to read it because it really expresses what the thought was in that day. The creation of urban parkland. That's what this was seen as a park. The idea of wave protection, protecting the land, which leads to a number of islands that can be used as urban parks, villages for shops and restaurants, casual performance places, children's play, and so on. This was an idea which I would argue is as valid today as it was then. This is from a wonderful speech by John Robarts, who actually opened Ontario Place, and you see some images of the forum. A number of us can probably remember sitting on the grass and listening to concerts. This was absolutely the combination of Michael and Ebb's thinking, the canopy structure that formed the stage, the landforms that formed the amphitheater, and it is what John Robarts said, it is with considerable degree of personal excitement that I welcome you to this special preview to mark the beginning of our 6-month countdown of the preparation of Ontario Place. There was a need for a place where we could examine our history, look at our cultural and economic growth, and contemplate the challenges of the future. In short, we wanted a place to reaffirm our identity as Ontarians and Canadians. So what happened next is kind of confusing. There was a long period after the initial excitement, after the great use of Ontario Place, when people got confused about what it was. They lost sight. They started to think of it as a revenue-producing theme park. And so I identified 21 studies done between 1973 and 2004, mostly done by accountants, which were asked to figure out how you could crank this space up to produce the maximum revenue. In the middle of that, what's really interesting, in the 90s, a very important idea emerged, which was that the fusion of Ontario Place and Exhibition Place, the 300 acres that they, with the water sheets that they would form, is what had the greatest potential. And so at that point, I got involved working for David Crombie, who was representing the province, and for Joe Pantaloni, who was the chair of the Exhibition Place Board, on studies for a merger of the two sites. And that led to some diagrams. It's not really a detailed plan, but it's a kind of visioning exercise to say, what if we could think about this as one place? And so building on that initial vision of Eb Zeidler and Michael Huff, the idea emerged for a different kind of parkland. We called it Lakefront Park. The consolidated Lakefront Park would offer an expanded array of experiences and a brand new waterfront gathering place, including recreation, entertainment, major events, theaters, marinas, art galleries, restaurants, and heritage sites that would act as a major international tourism draw. But very importantly, it would be part of the emerging network of waterfront parks across the entire waterfront, extending like an emerald arm across the waterfront, serving the needs of an expanding population, which obviously in the intervening 10 years has become an even greater need. So what that amounted to is looking at the two sites together, at the resources that they contain, not individually, but collectively, building on that with the idea of a band of park that would actually overcome the barrier of Lakeshore Boulevard, that would connect the two with a land bridge and a number of connections and the extension of the Martin Goodman Trail right across and around the edge of the water, wired by a variety of forms of public transportation, including expanded heavy rail, obviously the GO system, light rail, internal shuttles, waterborne transportation, cycling, walking, to make the site accessible within the 300 acres, but also getting to the 300 acres. And so we did a few little sketches imagining that you could have this land bridge across Lakeshore Boulevard, that you could get the Martin Goodman Trail out to the edge of those inaccessible places on the lake, which in part has been accomplished with Trillium Park, and that the inland waterways could become part of this parkland in a significant way. We identified a bunch of early win projects. We saw this as an incremental phased approach. And in fact, a number of these things have actually come to pass. What didn't, however, for a variety of reasons, is the province and the city never formally committed themselves to developing a combined master plan for the two sites. So they kind of have proceeded in parallel, but a number of things have happened nonetheless. 2012, there was a lot of consternation when the park was shut down, and in the vacuum, and a lot of concern that people felt like we feel today, John Tory was asked to head up a study by the province called Ontario Place Revitalization. And what was important about that is that John Tory, once again, in his report, committed to the fact that over time, a new iconic public park, and I underline public park, would be created that celebrates its connection to the waterfront of Lake Ontario. And this was in response to fears about what might happen with the sell-off. A year later, plans for a casino were announced. So this was not an abstract concern, it was a real concern. So again, from John Tory's report, the idea of must provide public open access to the waterfront year-round, not just for summer, must be parkland, a state-of-the-art park on the edge of a great lake. Values that I think we would all endorse. Now, I'm going to just zoom out for a moment to talk about what's happening that changes the context of this, how it fits in the larger picture. And this is really the perspective of Waterfront for All. What we've seen over the ensuing decades is a remarkable transformation of the Ontario waterfront, all the way from Invercote to the Scarborough Bluffs and beyond, in fact, extending beyond in both directions. And this is about the city interweaving with park space. We often make comparisons, envious comparisons to other cities, and people cite the Chicago waterfront. And the truth is, we will never have what Daniel Burnham gave to Chicago, this big consolidated waterfront park. What we do have is an improvised, incremental transformation of spaces along our waterfront, interwoven with some pretty creative city building, and it's giving us our version of what we're calling Waterfront for All. And Ontario Place has a great role to play in that. In 2012, I was working for the BIA in Liberty Village, and they convened a summit. And the summit was about looking at the increase in population in the surrounding neighborhoods like Liberty Village, CAMH, all the things that were happening there, and how these might connect to the waterfront relating to Ontario Place and Exhibition Place. And obviously, many tens of thousands of new residents had come to live in the area by that time. And so the idea came of thinking of these distinct neighborhoods as a web, as a network, and joining them to the thinking about Ontario Place and Exhibition Place, strategic, talking about acupuncture, open space improvements that would improve the connection so that people could actually get to the lake, not just as a destination that you would come to by car and park. And so the idea of a downtown structure plan, now not only just thinking about Ontario Place and Exhibition Place, but its relationship to all of those neighborhoods. Meanwhile, coming from the east, Waterfront Toronto's 2016-17 key projects map is actually showing a whole series of moves along that stretch of waterfront that would link over and connect to the combined site of Exhibition Place and Ontario Place. The Bentway, which has been one of my great pleasures to work on, actually has a future phase identified that would punch right under Straught Avenue on taking advantage of the opening for the old Grand Trunk Railway and occupying what Exhibition Place calls the cubicles, which are actually literally part of the Bentway, closed in with concrete block walls, currently used for vehicle storage, but could become a great cultural venue like the Wishwood Barns, like the Brickworks, that would actually connect to the exhibition. Meanwhile, TO Core, the city, is thinking very much along the same lines. There's a upland band of open space connections, not those literally on the water, but just behind it, that are once again leading to Ontario Place and Exhibition Place. And from the West End Beach community, along with the Toronto Conservation Area, has come up with a remarkable plan. Walter Kim, the author of that plan, Walter, just raise your hand, presented this at our Waterfront Summit. And this is a remarkable idea of stitching together some new public spaces along the Western Beach that lead to, guess what, Ontario Place and Exhibition Place. So this actually changes everything, the way in which the city is evolving. And so when you look at the site, both its internal great landscapes and assets in the forms of structures, the fact that there has been a revival, as Dave Harvey mentioned, the Cinesphere is operating. I was there last evening watching tons of people come to watch movies. The Pavilion Pods have a detailed restoration plan that's been prepared, that is ready to go. The Trillium Park and the William G. Davis Trail opened in 2017 after a $30 million effort. It is spectacular. So here you see that plan. This is the beginning of those incremental steps. And it is, I would say, one of our finest new parks. It is absolutely incredible. This too is a collaboration of Walter's firm Land Plan and West 8 from Rotterdam. It really, if you go back to Ed Zeidler and Michael Huff's original vision, this really delivers on the vision and it shows what can be done. In the meanwhile, there are all sorts of transitional uses that are coming. We have Pimenta and Lane Hinton from Artspin, who have done some wonderful things on the West Island. And the demonstration of the opportunity for arts and culture, for experimentation, for temporary uses is endless. There's a plan that not many people have seen for what's called Celebration Common, which would be the next logical step from Trillium Park. Extending that parkland idea, using the assets found on the ground right into the middle of the site and responding to all of these needs and uses and many of the things that a lot of you have been thinking about and working on. So all of this is not shovel ready, but it's thought ready. It has actually taken a lot of people and provided a lot of really careful and interesting thought into what might happen next. Now there's a myth that's been propagated that nothing's happening on the site. And in fact, the site is actually functioning. So right now, I took this off the web. This weekend, the Winter Light exhibition, skating, the bonfire, which I saw last evening, food and beverage, all of which admission is free. Movies at the Cinesphere, Free Solo, Princess Bride, movies on deck, Indiana Jones, Purple Rain, Titanic, and Spirited Away. This is not something which is not functioning. It actually has a life. It can be a much improved life, but it has a life. So finally, our purpose today is not to say what is the vision for Ontario Place. It's to really say, building on these great assets, building on the way the city is emerging around it, there's a whole array of things that could happen, both of a permanent nature, with partnerships, with adaptive reuse, with clever use of what we find on the ground, taking inspiration from the original creation, activities for children, adventure play, First Nations activities, swimming, skating, arts, culture, movies, performing arts, visual arts, and many, many other ideas that a lot of you have been communicating with us about. The great seasonal events of our city could be celebrated on this site. to enormous advantage. And very importantly, going back to the original inspiration, that machine on the garden image that I showed you, the Martin Goodman Trail weaving through the entire site with a new connection over in the vicinity of Dufferin, shoreline beaches, boardwalks, lookouts, restored landscape parks, and providing access for our population. So by contrast, we keep having this false idea of a big bang that will come, start over fresh, erase everything that's there, and make us world class. And my contention is if you have to use the term world class, you're not. So this was the threat in 2013 by MGM of a casino resort on the site. No Casino Toronto rose up and the city rejected this plan. But these ideas keep coming forward. The burning question for us is, can we hold on to the emerging vision over 5 decades for this strategic park as a linchpin in our greater waterfront public realm? Lastly, I want to make the point that people sometimes say, well, we have to do this because we can't afford it. We have to make money out of this site. And I asked some colleagues from HRA in New York, which is the foremost economic consulting firm that works on public space from a fiscal economic standpoint. And they produced a little deck for me, and I'm just going to show you a couple of slides from the deck. There is enormous value in taking the irreplaceable assets of great public parks in cities and thinking of them as economic development tools. This would apply both for the city and the province. So clearly, from the standpoint of property value, park-oriented development, tourism spending, worker attraction and retention, environmental benefits, equity and accessibility, these spaces, think of Central Park in New York, think of the Bois de Boulogne in Paris, think of Chapultepec Park in Mexico City, think of any great city. These are the icons. These are the places that people will go to when they visit any of those cities. And in addition to the pleasure that we derive from them, they have enormous economic benefit. I've worked with this firm, HRA. They worked with us on the Bentway, the Brooklyn Bridge Park, St. Louis with the Great Arch, Austin, Denver, Tulsa, Boston, and in every case, the demonstration of financial value has been tremendous. They encourage visitation to the city, they encourage visitors to stay longer. So I won't go into the details, but these are examples from New York, from Chicago, from Baltimore. In every case, they've done the economic analysis and they've actually shown the enormous return on investment. So if all you care about is the money, this is the best investment. And this is another set of examples related to worker attraction and retention. So we're now at a critical point, obviously, in this whole discussion. We've heard these rumblings from the province statement, like the current state of Ontario Place is disgraceful and there's nothing that can be saved. We need to turn it into a world-class attraction. Nothing is off the table. And the site, this one disturbs me most of all, will become more of an amusement destination than a waterfront one, whatever that is. So I think those of us in this room and outside this room, have a tremendous obligation to hold on to that long-standing vision that has been nurtured in our community. It is still valid, it's more needed than ever given our population growth. The latent potential is enormous in the current context for Ontario Place and Exhibition Place to be a less isolated, continuous part of our partner network. But clearly, let's not underestimate the vulnerability of this particular moment. It will require powerful public support and commitment from all of us. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ken. That was a great way to start our rally and some great words to get us moving forward. It's my pleasure now to introduce the next speaker, Mark Matson. Mark is the president of Swim Drink Fish Canada and co-founder of Lake Ontario Waterkeeper. He spent the last decade and a half working to uphold the ideal that each and every person has a right to swimmable, drinkable, fishable water. Mark is one of the smartest environmental campaigners that I know. He's just so good at knowing when is the time to partner, when's the time to make a deal, and when's the time to sue the pants off that horrible entity that's wrecking our water. So, Mark Matson, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I want to thank Dave and Susan, of course, Waterfront for All. When you go to Park People online, I noticed Sarah Harmer's tweeting around saying Park_people. At Park People is also a group in Milwaukee, so just if anybody's retweeting. I also want to thank Ken, thank you for that presentation. It was really great to have the history of the park, and to Karen and Zara who are following me on the panel. Thank you for having me here today, and to all of you. I know how important the future of Ontario places to everyone. You can see by this room, and I'm sure the room below, and just how much activity there was in terms of social media and the mainstream media, the Globe and Mail, the Toronto Star in the last few days. This was put together very quickly, but you can see how interested Torontonians and Ontario is in the future of Ontario. So I think that's a really great message already that's come out of this meeting, is that just how valuable this is, and that it's not going to be just swept under the rug, and that the public wants to be involved in its future. I'm just hoping to bring, it's really short, but just, it's always great to have different insights into these issues. And my insight is really born out of my work over the last 30 years as an environmental lawyer, and I wanted to bring it to the table here to be considered as we go forward. And so I'm president of Swim Drink Fish Canada. Swim Drink Fish, we have Lake Ontario Waterkeeper. I'm the Lake Ontario Waterkeeper. We run Fraser Riverkeeper in Vancouver, North Saskatchewan Riverkeeper in Edmonton. We created the Swim Guide, which is a platform now in 8 countries and over 3 million downloads, which updates water quality on a daily basis for these beaches. It was all started, Swim Guide, I can go into some other programs, but Swim Guide really was started because of our work here in Toronto with respect to the beaches. And all of you know, there's 11 great beaches in Toronto, 8 of them are blue flag. And when I started, I think there were 22 beaches in Toronto. And I think if you go back to the 80s, there are even more. But the ones we have now are very valuable, and we need to embrace them. But they became, as our organization started to grow, and I'll just go with the very first file I had in Toronto, Ula Coalgrass, and I'm not sure if she's here. She was an early pioneer of community air. She came to visit me up on Brunswick and Sussex in the late 90s, early 2000s, and was talking about a fixed link to the airport. One of the first matters we became involved in as Lake Ontario Waterkeeper was to look at the Navigable Waters Protection Act, which is no longer the Navigable Waters Act, it's the Navigable Protection Act now. But it allowed us to argue for a trigger for an environmental assessment of the fixed link. We made that argument at the time. Many of you know that became unnecessary because there was an election, and David Miller passed it. I think it was a bylaw or something here in Toronto that said that the fixed link wasn't going to be possible. But that was the first real legal file I worked on in Toronto. But it brought me to the waterfront. It got me involved. I was down at a place that's now, I think, the Arena Dog Show. It's down right across from there's the WestJet, there's a theater there, there's that bridge that goes across the marina, right downtown Toronto. And we were working down there and started looking at the water every day. And Toronto Environmental Alliance had done a map of the sewer sheds in Toronto, combined sewer overflow pipes, and there's 9 of them in the harbor. And we started noticing every time it rained how much the harbor would fill with sewage. There was also someone named Joanna Kidd who used to do a swim the bay, and I really wanted to swim the bay. I grew up as a swimmer, and I wanted to swim across the Toronto harbor. But when we started Lake Ontario Waterkeeper, just around that year was the year that they canceled that swim. And in fact, in the Toronto harbor, there is, although things have changed in terms of our recreational use, there really is no beach in the Toronto harbor. And if you look to the future of Toronto and what they're going to do with respect to their sewage system and the CSOs, it's going to be decades until the harbor is ever swimmable. Hopefully we'll get there and maybe we can move that up faster. But this summer, even our organization, it's our 3rd year, we had 200 volunteers. We took over 900 samples in the harbor. I know we've released that. Many of you might have seen those results. But things are really getting worse in the harbor right now for a bunch of reasons. The old CSOs mean that all the new construction and the condos and the buildings in downtown Toronto are built on a flawed system. So when it rains, the sewers fill with stormwater and they're all discharging into the harbor. So we have more discharges into the harbor now than ever before, just because we've built more people in downtown Toronto on an old system. So why does that mean? What does that mean with respect to Ontario Place? Well, in terms of our sampling, we've also discovered, I guess I should use some of these slides. We have quite an interesting knowledge of the monitoring beyond just the blue flag beaches and the beaches in Toronto that the city does. We monitor right across the harbour front. And we monitor and collect samples of fecal coliform and E. coli in some strange places, including at Ontario Place. And if you go to Ontario Place, you'll note that, especially the west southern end, there's this incredible point there that really brings you out into the middle of Lake Ontario, and you have this sense that you're in a place of wilderness, and there's a beach there, and you'll notice the sign, no swimming. This is very common. I think when we were giving meaning and force to environmental laws, I used to always think of the force side, but I wasn't thinking of the meaning enough. And I think what happened not only in Toronto, but right across Canada and right across all the Great Lakes is we really think we're protecting people by putting up these signs, don't swim, don't fish, don't drink. And it has to do with contamination. It might have to do with old landfills, old sewers, etc. But when we put these up and there isn't a sign beside them saying temporary because we're going to fix the problem, they become part of our understanding of our waterfront. They become part, we accept them. We start to think that these signs now are the way it's always going to be. It's the way it should be. And so that's really happened. These no swim, no drink, no fish signs have now become ways that we protect people, we think. But in fact, what we've really done is pushed away generations of children and youth, and even ourselves, away from the water, so that we no longer discover and understand the problems or what's causing the problems or how to fix them. And so we swim, drink, fish, really the first idea we had was to take the no off. That's the whole, you get the swim, drink, fish Canada. Instead of no swim, no fish, no drink. We really saw those signs and thought that our job was to take those, the do not swim off signs off. And it's not just because we want people to go swimming. It's because when you think of giving meaning and force to environmental laws, the most important part of meaning comes from the connection with your waterfront. If you don't have a connection, you're not going to know anything about the Environmental Protection Act, the Ontario Water Resources Act, and Lost the Navigable Waters Protection Act. You're not going to know about the process of public processes that were put in place to make decisions, because you're just not connected any longer to the water. So to give meaning to environmental laws, not only here in Toronto, but across the Great Lakes and across Canada, we have to make a real effort to start connecting people to the water. That was the reason why, and you can call it a tale of two cities, Kingston and Toronto, because I was working on sewage in both cities at the same time in the early 2000s. But that's really why the Gord Edgar Downey Pier now became part of the Kingston Waterfront Plan and the Breakwater Park. Garfield Weston Foundation was very generous to our organization, said pick some really iconic projects and make them really more important. Do something that's going to leave a legacy on the Great Lakes. And for us, we thought, well, what we need to do is connect people to water. And so we looked at a bunch of plans across the lakes, and there was the Breakwater Park plan, and it's beautiful in downtown Kingston, right in front of Queens, and the trail, talked to David Crombie, and everything was looking great. And I'm going, well, why aren't you building some way people can get into the water? And they were like, most cities saying, well, liability. We're going to get a lot of dope smoking hippies out there jumping in, someone's going to die. And I'm not taking that lightly, because yes, the Great Lakes and water is a very dangerous place, as we know. But I always thought, when you go out west and you see the Rocky Mountains, the towns haven't built fences to keep people from going into the mountains, although they know they're dangerous. No, in fact, they have to teach them a certain literacy about how to be safe in the mountains. It's the same with the Great Lakes. To be out there, even on that pier right there, you have to have a certain sense of the dangers involved. And so we said to the city of Kingston, and they had a really progressive mayor, this is your chance to really take that old coal pier and turn it into something fabulous. And they brought a consultant in, and they worked with us incredibly and created what probably in my 30 years of environmental activism, this has become the most successful thing we've ever done, believe it or not. Maybe it's because it's in front of Queen's University and so many people have kids who go there, so the word gets spread across the country. But everywhere I've gone, every city, from Moncton to Vancouver to Hamilton, people are talking about why can't we have a pier? Why can't we have something like this in our city where the kids and the public can go for free and experience what it's like, not just to walk into the water, but to go and jump off a pier and do a flip into the water. A very Canadian thing to do, as Canadian as you can imagine. So this was really exciting, and Gord lived across the street, and he was on my board, and he was sick, and I asked him if he'd lend his name, and he you know, he didn't like to do things like that, but he did, and I thought it was really, personally for me, it was very important this year when his family came out the day of the opening, and really, it was really great. And I argued with him that why we should put his name on this is because this completes the circle of what we started 20, 25 years ago about connecting people to water, and that this was truly, you know, emblematic of that work. So here we are, getting back to Ontario Place, and, you know, I went out here to check it out and check out the trail, and boy, you know, it sure is beautiful out there. I don't know if any of you have been out there. There's incredible beaches. And we've taken water samples out there, and it's a long way away from the pipes. It's a long way away. We know the water's clean out there. We know that it basically resembles the water at Hamlin Point, Gibraltar, getting out to Center Park, which are on the island and they're great beaches, but they're more difficult to get to. You can't just go for a run from downtown Toronto and go swimming and go back to work. It's going to take you a while. Maybe because of that fixed link we stopped. But this place is really in the middle of the city now. I was surprised. I used to think it was so far away, and now with Liberty Village and everything building up. And then I remember the West End Phoenix, and I know a lot of them are here. It's a really fabulous paper. My friend Dave Bedini did a water issue. And I read the article by David Sachs. He was talking about the West End. Out on the lake along the city's western shoreline, right over paddleboard, David Sachs discovered that raw sewage, dead carp, and floating toilet seats can only mean one thing to the self-propelled watercraft enthusiast: go east. And he has a real point. When you get to the west end of Toronto, you know, with the Humber, which is down way below here, and there's real problems there. You know, there are issues, even the Humber Park, the beaches, and we do the water quality there. It's very high in E. coli. This is one place that we could direct the paddlers to go. It was right off the west southern end of this park. And it started to occur to us, wow, can you imagine the city of Toronto? This would be like the place where the kids, the youth, the older people who still want to go to the water or get in the water could once again experience Lake Ontario. And if we could connect them again to a clean Lake Ontario, in terms of money, I just want to be really clear. Lake Ontario is the most valuable piece of water in the whole country. There's a reason for that, because 9 million people drink from it. There's more industry and business and real estate and development going on Lake Ontario than anywhere else. I mean, people downplay Lake Ontario, but let me be very clear on the travel. This is the most important water body in the country. And we need people to once again experience it, to connect with it, to understand it. And this is an opportunity for that type of experience, not just to have the trail, which is great, and the park and the public land, but to have us a way for people to experience what it is to get on or in the water. And so I love this picture. We have one of our staff out sampling, and you can just feel how, I don't know, it just seems otherworldly there. That's Mississauga in the background. You see the little deck up there. And you know, with the proper, like the Gord Dam Pier, I didn't have a great picture of it, but they built for everyone. The elderly, the disabled, they have ramps to get in the water, they have for the kids, they have sand, they have everything. They block the deep water so you can get into the shallow if you're learning. It was beautifully designed. I think it was Cormier Architects, but they did a great job. And the same thing could be done here, which would ultimately get more people down to Ontario Place. And I just want to end with that, which is that I don't have all the answers either. And I'm not here to give you all the answers. But I do feel like, you know, Ontario Place, Lake Ontario Place, I call it, has a lot of answers for all of us. And if we go out there and let it answer some questions for us, get out there, experience it, think about what it could be. Think about Lake Ontario, think about the wilderness, look at the moon rising over the lake, and think about how the crazy winds and the cold, and just think, what answers can it give to the City of Toronto on our problems with environmentalism, with a lack of swimmable, accessible water? How are we going to protect our drinking water? How are we going to connect our citizens to understand our laws and our protections and participate in that? And I think Ontario Place is the place that holds those answers for all of us. So I want to thank you all for having me here today, and good luck. And we'll be right there with every one of you as we go forward.
Thanks for both Ken and Mark for setting this stage. And Mark, I just want to let you know that yesterday Ken and I were out at Ontario Place and we actually saw your staff doing water samples and it was mighty chilly.
We're in tag team. If you do both bios, then we're good.
Well, then somebody's going to need, actually, Dave, they want to do Karen and Zara together. So if you want to bring Zara's bio, that's great. And while Dave's coming up, I just want to do a check-in. So I'm hoping that the folks down in the rotunda are doing okay. Yes, okay, great, thanks. And that the people out there who are streaming with us, that's wonderful. I can see that there's lots of tweets going on, so that's great. The next piece, so Karen and Zara, again, we said this was fluid and why we love it. We just want to let you know that now we've got volunteers around the room. They've got either a button or a badge. And so what's going to happen is we're going to ask you, if you haven't already, to grab some Post-it notes and start writing your stories. And if you can't, we'll have runners maybe come around and start slapping them up on the mats. As I mentioned, there is no formal break, so feel free if you need to get up and move around. The air here, the quality is wonderful. And so we'll go from that. So I'll start by introducing Karen, and then Dave can introduce Zara, and then they're going to figure out what we're going to do next. I just met Karen this morning. I've heard about her many times, and so today we did the first face-to-face. And a little bit about Karen, she is a cultural executive consultant with over 20 years experience working in a variety of museum, culture, and community development settings in Toronto. She is the co-founder of Black Artists Network's Dialogue, BAND for short. And over the past 10 years, BAND has been dedicated, to documenting, promoting, and educating toward the advancement of Black artists and cultural workers in Canada and abroad. Karen's approach to museum development is most evident in her work as founding executive director of Museum of Toronto, a community collaboration-driven museum without walls in Toronto. Museum is an innovative approach to the museum experience and a new way to experience Toronto's natural spaces, cultures, history, archaeology, and architecture. Karen is currently working on a variety of initiatives to help organizations better engage community stakeholders to diversify audiences through collaborative programming models that achieve long-term operational and financial stability.
And we also have Zara Ibrahim over there too. So Zara is a designer and urbanist using participatory practices to engage citizens in the design of services, policies, and infrastructure. She's an executive director of Deloitte on civic innovation and a senior advisor to political and public interest initiatives across the country. Prior to Deloitte, Zara founded and led Architects, working with communities to co-design towards better social outcomes and leading some of Canada's most ambitious participatory infrastructure and policy programs. She teaches at all sorts of different institutions. She's won like gazillions of awards. You're on boards all over the place, but I know that a lot of people around this room use this idea of this name of city builder. And just for Zara, I just think she's one of the most smartest, thoughtful, best connected city builders in North America. She's a city building rock star. So we're so pleased to have both Karen and Zara here to help us. Thanks so much.
Hey, hey! How are you?
Good.
They didn't expect that, big boy.
Yeah, we kind of kibosh the schedule. Can everyone in the back hear us? No? Okay, so we need
Okay, sorry.
We're going to get you mics because we're videotaping. well.
The hey was just
Okay.
for.
Now you can hear us.
Okay, can you hear me now? I won't do the hey again. That hey was just for you. So here's the thing about gathering in these type of moments in this city's history and its collective memory is there's real power in that. At least I believe that as a museum wonk, as a heritage wonk, as a person that spent her entire career in the museum sector. I think one of the powers that museum and heritage advocates have is the importance of memory. And so Ken and Mark have given us some of that context. Ken in literally taking us back to the beginning, and Mark and that focus on the water and heightening some of our sense of context. And myself and my rock star friend Zara are going to kind of pull you in now, hopefully to leave feeling empowered to help make what the public desire is the outcome. So that's the goal. You good with that? Yeah. Okay. You want to say something?
Yeah, and we were supposed to do our sessions separately, but we're going to do them together.
Make our own rules.
Make our own rules, really living the ethos of today. But what we're trying to do is not just focus on what we're going to lose. I think sometimes in these conversations, we're like, well, we don't want to lose the Sinisphere because it's amazing. We don't want to lose the silos, but we also want to think about what unknown do we want to start playing in? What kind of dreams do we have for our city and the kinds of delight we want to design into it? You know, sometimes in fights like this, we feel like we have to be super serious, and Karen and I were talking about that earlier, that sometimes we get so sober that we forget that it's okay to want delight in our city. It's okay to want joy in our city, and actually, to Ken's great point, it can also, when people are delighted in different parts of our city, it drives all sorts of the other good things that help the city tick. So I just give you those two sort of frames in that we're not just focusing on what we're going to lose. We're trying to think about, you know, what do we want? What don't we have that we can introduce back into the city?
So in this idea of memory and the power of collective memory, the interactive component of this is going to ask you to think about what would be one of your most important memories of Ontario Place. I think all of us have a story about this place, which is what's galvanized us to be a part of this rally around Ontario Place and its importance as a public space. And so the power of hearkening and pulling those memories together to help us recall things that we may not remember, help us to connect the memories we have personally to the broader collective is the exercise that we're gonna start you on in this path, in order to not have you leave here feeling like, oh my God, this was such a great thing, and now we're screwed. We want you to leave here feeling like, oh my God, this is a brilliant thing, and we're empowered based on this knowledge and collective memory to drive forward for a broader public good for the next generations to come. So I have some props. I like props, just saying. And the props will help what I'm hoping will become a bit of a visual mapping in this room, and we'll pull in some of the sticky notes with the volunteers across the space to pull some of the memories that will come from online from the folks that are watching with the streaming. I think we'll use the pillars, and here are my buckets. See if you can remember this. So, oh, you want the memories on the map? What's a sticky note? Come on, really? Sorry, I might get in more trouble, me and my lack of following rules. I don't know how I have a career as that. Dear Lord actually said that to me once. She said, Karen, how do you have a career? Follow some rules. Okay, wherever we put the sticky notes, the important thing is to invoke the memory, so I won't worry about that. I'm gonna share one of my, sorry?
Put them on the maps.
Okay, we'll put them on the maps. We've been told, put them on the maps. I'm winking, put them on the maps. So here are my memory buckets, and then I'm gonna share a memory, Zara's gonna share a memory, and then we'll get these sticky notes distributed, and we'll start writing things down, and then we'll move according to the buckets to different areas in the room. So family or childhood memory, arts, culture broadly, music. I have music as a specific memory bucket because my memory, selfish, is of the Forum. It was my first date with a proper guy who picked me up at the house. My dad was very overprotective. I was like 18, I know. This might explain why I'm still single, Sarah. I didn't get that early 16-year-old dating in where the parents chaperone you to the movie and chaperone you home. I was 18. His name was Don, and he was a big music, jazz, blues head, which is why he got me to go out with him. We went to see B.B. King at Ontario Place. Remember that? Were you there? Oh my God, one of the best concerts ever. Free. We brought sandwiches, we sat on the grass, and I had one of the most amazing memories of my life. So music. And then date night. So date night's kind of connected. So you may find things are kind of overlapping, but I have friends who, that was a place that they went on their first date. Newcomer moment. I remember working at Harbourfront Centre and meeting kids who literally did not know we had a lake because they lived up north in Jane and Finch and never got down. So this idea that this public space, free to the general public, means that it's accessible for people who are dealing with different income levels. I didn't clock that as a kid because we did that. My dad was a truck driver. We always found the places that were cool and free. But the newcomer bit is really important. And then the last one is just being by the water. Just being by the water. I come from the Caribbean. I just came from the Caribbean. Notice the darker tone of my skin, those of you who know me. Being by the water is healing. So my props are the following, and then I'm gonna let you share your memory while I hand out the props. Some of you will see my birth certificate. That goes to the newcomer. I'm gonna hand that to somebody. This little flask is date night, because you know, sometimes you have a little drink on the date. Water. This is a fancy Pava-free thingy bottle. Jazz, music, Oscar Peterson. Is that my last prop? Oh, art. I'm gonna give this to Rumi. Oh, yeah, you get the art. You don't get to keep it. People have been looking at it, so that's the first prop. Q. Sarah.
You know, that was, I'm really glad you explained all of that because I was sitting beside Karen as she very nonchalantly put a flask out as they were introducing her, so I'm glad that was explained. It all makes sense now. I'm from Vancouver, so the water was not a destination for me. It was part of my everyday life. So it was a bit surreal when I moved to Ontario, and it was such a project for people to go to the waterfront. One of the things I most loved was when I first moved to the city and didn't know anyone, I would go for runs in the evenings, but on Thursdays and Fridays, when I didn't have a lot of bud, so I would just kind of wander around the city, I would often find myself sitting across from a concert. So the concert that many of you were probably in, I was sitting outside in my running clothes, just listening in and enjoying sort of the ambient sounds and the sound of the water. And I just found it a place where even if I wasn't part of something, I could still be part of something. You didn't need to be in it to be in it. So it's as much a place as you can go. For me, it became a place where I would go to do things, but also just go to be around other people doing things, which is kind of what we forget about in public space. The more research that I read about, you know, great public realms all over the world, some of it is that we just want to be around other people. We did a piece of research recently with Park People, actually, that had this amazing insight around public space, specifically on waterfronts, that a lot of us want this thing called say hello and then you go. So just a really quick hi to someone that's familiar or who's looking at the same thing. And then we want to keep going. We don't want to have an involved conversation. We just want to have these moments where we have a quick connection and then move on. So for me, that was really my experience of Ontario Place. And then I really didn't actually get into Ontario Place in a meaningful way until in future, which was a memory that I can't get out of my mind. I just come from my favorite comedian's comedy show, Tig Notaro, and just didn't want the evening to end. And so we went in future, and the friend that I was with, we just went straight to the silos. We'd been quite a few times at that point. We went straight to the silos, and we just lay and looked out at the ceiling for about an hour. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, how lucky are we? This is like, I want everyone in the city to see this. This is the dreamiest, most ethereal thing I've ever experienced in Toronto. And I was surrounded by all these other people, and there was teenagers. And it was just like, all of us were just lying on the ground looking up in a public place. And it was the best. I don't want to lose that. I don't want to lose that dreaminess. So whether I'm in it or watching other people in it, Ontario Place is a place where I can go and be many things, not just one. And so that's a bunch of my memories. The one thing one caveat I will say as we're going around to different areas of the room, there's so many people here today and we want to try and hear from as many as possible. So I really like Misha Bluberman's 1/n rule of conversation, which is if there's n people in a room, there's about 194, 200 people in this room, you should be speaking 1/n of the time. So as you get up to share your awesome story, just let's be mindful because we don't have that much time together today.
If you want to post or tweet, just remember the ON place for all, just so that we're following the Twitter thread, and also for folks that are online sharing memories so that we're grabbing those. And just use the word memory in your tweet so we're able to capture. I was a delinquent and missed the probably most important memory, which was a childhood memory. So if you have a family memory, Rolo has the tiny little black angel from my Christmas tree to represent the family thing, little cherub. Cherub makes you think of familia. So I dropped some sticky notes down the middle of the walk, and then there's volunteers also walking around with sticky notes. So I've also dropped some markers if someone wants to grab from the end, or the volunteers are also circulating. If you want to start writing, we're going to give you a couple of minutes so you can ruminate, maybe talk to someone beside you, walk around the room a bit if you want. No one wanted my Jamaican birth certificate to represent the newcomer. I'm just saying.
We're even losing it.
What? I have 2 copies. There's a story behind this Jamaican birth certificate. I might tell you another day, not today. So, should we let them go?
Let's take 2-3 minutes and just document his story. If you don't have a Post-it, just turn to the person beside you and maybe share it with them. We'll give you a couple minutes.
And we'll give you music while you, because then we can stop you when the music stops.
Right over the camera right now. Share your memories.
You know what these things do? Yeah, and we want people to feel like they have to have something that today to do something that was important, but also just take it off. I just
BBK concert. Really? That was a good one. Oh, I bet. BBK. I don't remember how it was. Talk about a guy who shoots his A game at the time. It's not misleading for me. Oh, really? He's a jazz musician now in Florida. And he's pretty cool. Awesome. Yeah, really enjoying it. This is awesome. Our match is amazing. It's not good. Wow. The live stream stayed alive. There's like 50 people on there. Yeah, one of the things I was going to ask is legal on a lot of stuff. Yeah, it would be. Although it's picking up like an hour. We've got 50 people watching. 50 people. I got the information. I can say short for 2 minutes, but it's like 5 minutes.
So I think that's this one of those places was interacting with the area. What's
The press will report it. I made it up here to get your speech. Great.
What a lot of energy in this room.
Yeah. Well, see, I have great memories. My children have great memories. My 20-year-old. And he also took the fucking seeds. And he has great memories.
He had bad. No sign.
I used to go to the jazz festival. And it was like every night.
So did you see how many notes?
Oh yeah, no. People are running it, they can't find things.
Okay, oh, we
I had to help you. As soon as we were under all those words.
Very good.
I learned a few things for next week.
Exactly. Especially the new generation. They have no experience.
You have to go because you couldn't be patient.
Yeah, we shouldn't have
But they're all interested. All they know how to consume entertainment. They actually don't know how that there's another way.
Okay, then we can.
I thought I was
No, but we have the media together, so we start.
Anyhow, I guess we're supposed to write these memories. Oh, I just post them on there. All right.
When you and I we have one really ambitious day.
We also had the landscape architect.
So we found out if you were very
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my
sure we could make it.
I know. But we were laughing all the time. It was
I was there. One of my most distinct memories, I went to the sailing the second day. Some kids sailed alongside of the hideout and broke the forestay. The mast I was in my boat, less than 100 meters away, watching this evolve. But I crashed in the hideout numerous occasions.
You know, I talked to Ken so much about it. I want to see also that the boat is more alive with boats. I want to go with the boat in the other.
We used to do that.
Exactly.
Well, and we tried to watch
even
the ferry, but it was
exactly.
interesting.
Even no, but if we start to work with it, then we take the boat off the highway, going to Boston.
Well, the Rochester ferries were not away.
Yeah, no, but we can get the bring get the and use it only because they used to bring and they can be for the children. To move on to the car, from the island.
So the appropriate emergency. Well, I was also thinking for the actual airport area. The airport, I think, go back to nature. Right there.
So perfect nature and bring all the stuff that changes.
All weather.
So everybody can
And we can do the vast majority of the development. And we have some support lands still to go. And I don't know if the city is going to have an opportunity to take advantage of that. And I don't.
Okay, we're gonna have you get back to your seats if you can. Find your way to a seat. Any seat is fine.
It ain't Times Square, I'll tell you that.
Have you ever seen the park in New York on 53rd and 6th? It's a little tiny park, like with a big space for a big size house.
Yeah.
And they've got like places
Right.
they're sitting.
If we could get back to our seats, that would be awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
Like, you know, like
Want to hear your story?
that is hot.
Oh, wow.
All right. So we would love to hear a bunch of things from all of you, but starting with what was the story you shared, but also I would love to hear you talk about someone else's story you heard, something that sticks with you that you think maybe is a part of a story we want to tell about who we are as a city. So you can tell your own, or you can retell something that you heard that was particularly evocative. And we have a hand at the back, and we have runners with mics.
Hi there. Well, my memory, you learn to approach Ontario Place from a different perspective when you're visiting it for the first time as a 4-year-old with your JK class back in 1975, and then you go back 14 years later and you work there for 2 summers in 89 and 91. So as someone who's had the experience of working there and actually being there as a child for many years, I will certainly lament the loss of something that is very joyful if it's transformed into something that really shouldn't be what it's not meant to be. So that is my story. I mean, there's music, I've forged great friendships working there, and what I'll take back is just a lot of happy memories.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that.
We have another hand up here.
And then we have one in the front.
Yep. So maybe we'll go back front, alternate. Keep your hands up if you.
Hi, everyone. I have several memories, as this gentleman just shared, having gone there as a 7-8-year-old in the 70s, and then memories from high school, and then current memories going in future with my daughter, walking through there, going to Trillium Park. She goes to the YMCA summer camps there. So, right, and I've lived out here for years. So that's my regular running trail too from Ontario Place. So it's so many memories to share. But one that I do remember from childhood is it was a really special place for kids, really magical. It wasn't an amusement park, but it was something really, really special, interactive. And I remember, do you guys remember the Children's Village under the big top? Yeah. And those boxing bags that were hanging down that you'd run through and you'd be knocking kids over, they'd be getting up, and no one would be getting hurt or screaming or crying. Everyone would just be having a lot of fun. So that's certainly a memory from Ontario Place. So I'll leave it to that for now.
Thank you. Who's next?
I want to say what a beautiful design principle that it needs to sort of inspire magical sensibility in us. I want to let you know that we have a wonderful note taker who's writing everything down, so none of this nuance is gonna get lost. So everything's getting written down.
I worked at Ontario Place the first year it opened and got my water pilot's license courtesy of the Ontario government. And that license allowed me to drive the tour boats through out of the site. It was magical, and being from North York, which is sort of basically farmland at that time, it was really not my first introduction to the waterfront, but it certainly excited me about the waterfront and brought me much closer and made me much more interested in the waterfront. So I think that interest is something that we need to keep going, and I think that Ontario Place has a lot of potential to keep that interest going.
Thank you.
A lot of hands. So we're at the back and then we'll come back to the front. Walter, you're next.
Oh, okay, I'm both. And I think we forget sometimes that Ontario Place, the pods in particular, were a showcase for Ontario's emerging technologies, and that's where I saw my first McClavier, which was one of the very first music synthesizers. And there was a guy by the name of Paul Hofford I discovered later was a part of a group called Lighthouse.
Oh, wow.
He had one of the first ones, and I think it was amazing that you could walk through the pods and anybody from the world could come and see what Ontario had to offer in the way of the latest things happening here.
Awesome. I love all the OG Ontario Placers in the room with like all the claps for the stories from so many years ago.
Walter Cam has some things to say about future dreams later, but 1812 over Tchaikovsky, Sejiazawa, and a hi-hat, boom! That's why the kids were knocked off. Amazing concert.
I saw my first magnificent, gigantic film in a cinesphere, and it was called North of Superior.
We all remember North of Superior. That was a class trip for me.
And having lived in a big city all my life, I just thought, what a gorgeous, vast province we get here.
Thank you for that.
My turn? So I too have a ton of memories, childhood memories from, my young adulthood. But I'm going to share something very recent. I'm Patricia, I'm the Executive Director of the Toronto Biennial of Art. Up until recently, we've been looking at Ontario Place as a very important and focused area for our biennial, as many of us who went to In Future saw the magic of that place when you hand it over to artists, and what can be done on that incredible piece of land with the varied architecture and all these exciting spots. Part of our hard work has been to have artists come here and really respond to Toronto as a place. And when taking artists, and these are international exhibiting artists and also local artists who've been all over the world and have looked at incredible places all over the world, and when we took them to Ontario Place, they could not believe that we were sitting on something so special. And all of them want to create a work in and around Ontario Place. So I think I just wanted to share that with you, the power of that place being on the water. Ebbside, there's incredible pods which are so magical, and then all that kind of quirky landscape around there, and then it's on the water. So we need to keep it magical. Thank you so much for this lady in the back.
Hi, I'm a long time. I'm a native of Toronto, and I just want to pick up on a couple of things that have been said already today. First of all, I am one of those North York natives that it was a big project for our family to come down to the waterfront. And I had a job at Ontario Place, and I was the demo person for the McClavier. I worked in the Future Pod, and it was an extraordinary experience for me. I worked there, and I saw an incredible array of people come to Ontario Place, see the innovation that was going to be possible here at that time, and experience the music, and what an incredible place it was for me as an opportunity when I was a teenager. it also, and now I'm a homeowner, I live in the beach area, and I am a user of the beach. I go there every day. And I am very conscious of my responsibility as a citizen of Canada, as a citizen of Ontario, and as a homeowner here in Toronto. I'm a custodian of this city. I'm a temporary, I'll be here and then I'll be gone. But what remains is my responsibility. And I want to see us have a vision for this type of land. I don't want to see this type of land disappear and never be able to re-grasp it. Because once it's gone, it's gone. Once it's concreted over into a parking lot, it will never become the vision that Ken was describing earlier. And I want to see people come forward like they are today and take responsibility for the type of vision that we want to have here in Ontario.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that's a nice transition. We know there are so many stories to be shared. We also know that we only have this room for another hour. So we're going to take this one last story, and then we are going to transition into the next part of the session.
We're going to give Walter 1 minute after that last story to help with the transition.
Hi.
Is there
My name is Bill Ferguson. People talking about remembering things at Ontario Place. It was, of course, the first time IMAX was shown in Canada. And the founders of IMAX were 4 in number. One of them was my brother Graham. One was my brother-in-law Roman Kreuzer. Both of them made films at Expo. And they got together and decided to make a bigger screen and a bigger one projector instead of multi-screens. And so they came to, at least they invented IMAX. The other 2 inventors were from Gulf too, which is where I'm from. Everybody should know that. Anyway, they came to Expo, or to Ontario Place, and my brother he was the director and the producer and the film, the maker of he filmed a lot of it, north of Superior. So that is a family memory that we have. And it bothers me a bit in that the idea of tearing the place down. I think, IMAX, as you know, has now become a world thing. It's in every continent. And I think since it was invented in Ontario, and we should be proud of it in Canada. And we should still have the original IMAX theater, which is.
Thank you, Bill. So as we transition, we're going to continue hearing from you, but we want to give you a few new instructions. Before we do, we're just going to give Walter the floor for a minute to talk about his current work with Ontario Place.
Thank you. Over 3 years, I've been heavily involved in planning, designing, and building Trillium Park. And I'm literally on site every day, to this day. I meet people, I talk with people, Russia, Germany, France. People don't realize the international exposure without publicity, without marketing. It's the internet. People come to Toronto now because they heard about it. Some initiatives. The government right now wants to deal with private sector involvement. Over the last 3 or 4 weeks, 4 months, I've been approached by people in the food industry. They want a place in Toronto, like they have 5 farms in New York City, we have in Boston, we have in Baltimore, Chicago. Hydroponic urban agriculture in the pods, the produce, the food going to the people in homeless shelters through Food Share of Toronto. We haven't talked about that aspect of society because so much tends to be high-end in our thinking. There are people in shelters right now who need food. Ontario Place has empty pods. The food industry, through the University of Guelph, through Vineland, research technology producing food for people. Been approached by Landscape Ontario. They have Canada Blooms in the summer. They want to host the Chrysanthemum Festival this fall. Chrysanthemum festivals in Asia are huge. So the botanical aspects, the horticultural aspects, the Eden Project in England, places like that that are green, clean, accessible, and make money. People don't realize we had over 1.5 million people visit Ontario Place this year. Figures haven't been released. We're hearing it for the first time. We've been told not to release the figures. Imagine, another 500,000 people to the Budweiser, that's equal to the people who go to the CNTL, which is highly publicized. We have no publicity, people know about it because of things like you're doing, and people want outdoor recreation. People live in village, 600 square feet, a place to go, bicycle riding, baby carriages, jogging, skiing, walking, sitting on lawns, watching through the observation stone they see in the shop. Quirky things and climbing rocks. That's it.
It is amazing to hold on to in our minds that without proactive investment, we're still getting 2 million people a year to Ontario Place. So just, I think that's a great thing to do on as we move forward. Norm's going to share just a few stories that are coming in online.
Thank you. So yeah, one of them that came up was Lyle Lovett calling his fiance Julia Roberts onto the stage of the forum. That's pretty awesome. Another one that came up was an online viewer saw their very first Tragically Hip concert at the forum, which is also amazing. God rest Gord's soul. And thirdly, does anybody remember a forest of punching bags? That came up online. Yes? Okay. And that's what I got online. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we want to talk a lot about what's next for Ontario Place. And I always struggle, I think since it was shut down, I think I've been asked maybe 10 different times by 10 different news outlets or students or whoever, maybe someone doing some of those studies can mention, about what the vision is for Ontario Place. And as someone who thinks about this all the time, about the city and urbanism and public space, it's still hard. We want a great park. We want a place for kids. We want a place to recognize our complex history along the water with our First Nations and Indigenous communities. And it's hard sometimes to get specific. And so today we'd like to do a little bit of both. We'd like to think about the big visions, but also the really specific things about the space and try and bring them together. Because sometimes we aren't just sitting at home brewing and brooding on a grand vision. All we know is the kind of space we need, how we want to feel in that space, who we want to see, who we want to engage with. So I'm going to give you a few prompts to talk about how we can look forward in Ontario Place. And, sometimes the thing I've flagged for myself just to share, sometimes we can only see as far as we know. So we think about what are the other places in the world, or what are other places that inspire me, which is really great. But I was recently doing some writing with Ken, and this sort of idea of let's be the best practice instead of following the best practice, I think could be a really cool principle for Ontario Place. So think about that. So don't just use us, don't just compare to the other things that we already know. That's okay. But also let's bust through that and think about what's net new that we can introduce to the world in this great public space. So here are some things to consider. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have you, instead of going to the boards, just turn to the person beside you and have a conversation about these particular questions. And then if the conversation kind of dwindles off and you said all you need to say, find another pair and pair up with them and talk about what you talked about. So we'll start with a pair. And here are some of the questions we'd love you to consider. The first is connected to what Ken was saying earlier, which is this is such an amazing space to affirm our identity as Torontonians, as Ontarians. But I think we need to tell the story of what our identity is now. We know what it was, but what is it now? And so if you want to discuss, who are we as a city now and what needs to be represented, who needs to be represented, and how, that would be a really great question to discuss. Who needs a place in the city? So I think that's another conversation that we haven't yet really dived into today, which is a lot of people who need a great public space in the city who don't have it in their front yard or their backyard or in their neighborhood. So who needs this? Who could this be for? We want this to be a place where people who live all over the city, not just along the waterfront or in the core, to really come and feel a sense of belonging. So who needs it? This one I just threw in at the last minute because I like thinking in different time scales. So often we think about going there for a day, and that being a destination, and so many of the stories are of Ontario Place as a destination. But what if we were to think about going to Ontario Place for 10 minutes, or an hour, or a day? So can I prompt you to think about different time scales? Because one of the things we'd really love to do is make this a part of our everyday life so that we don't need to rally, it's just known that it's important. And I think that's a really cool opportunity for us as we think about the waterfront. So think about our identity, who we are, and what we need to express in our new space. Who needs this space? And it could be us, but it could be others who are not in the room. And thinking about different increments of time and how we could design into Ontario Place activities for the 5-minute visitor, or the 1-hour visitor, or the 1-day visitor. So what we're gonna ask you to do is turn to the person beside you. If they are someone you came here with or know, maybe turn to the person on the other side, because we're all gonna be working really hard together for the next 2 weeks, or a week, or however long it is, and we need to make some new friends and allies, so try and find someone you don't know. So we'll give you 5 or 10 minutes to check with them.
Oh, John, what about you? Okay, well, thanks for coming. We're finishing this, right? This is my door. Oh, great. Okay, yeah. I don't think anybody else is doing flyers. So I think so. We'll check with Cindy. Anyway, it was a pleasure. Thank you for your help. Thank you very much. we've had 50 people. Yeah, they're all like chatting and relaxing, and then we'll capture all these comments and people can tell their stories as well. Going great. So I would guess everybody just so many things to go on, especially with that. I wonder what I should ask them online. Like, I'm trying to encapsulate that. So it's about how many what you do, 10 minutes, an hour. I'll ask the audience. That makes sense. What's he talking about here? We're good. At the Waterfront for all something, maybe with people watching, maybe it's something far better.
Okay, can we get you back to your seats, please? And quiet, maybe you're in your seats, but just quiet down. Love to hear from everyone.
Order the day of the participatory.
Welcome back from your conversations, everyone.
Let's get in the sharing mode.
All right. So it sounds like people had things to talk about. Okay. So it sounds like you had a couple things to say. Who wants to start? We'd love to hear some of the visions.
Do we have microphones around the room again?
And if we could just bring the volume down a little so that we can support everyone to be heard. We'll start up here at the front and then we'll just go back, front, back, front.
Hi, something that came up is similar to, oh, sorry, thank you, Cindy. So something that came to mind is similar to what they got in Montreal, which is called Biodome. If we, sorry, I couldn't remember the name, senior moments, well, senior years. The idea being having a place where you could see the ecology of all of Ontario, including the Arctic, because I think many of us never get to see most of Ontario. And being able to sort of experience it in one place would be phenomenal. And I don't know how many people have been to Biodome, but it's set up so that each area has a different sort of habitat. And it would certainly be something that's possible. Whether anybody's got the will or the money is a different story, but it certainly is a possibility. So that's something that came up, among other things. We came up with a lot of things.
That touches actually on one of the really important conversations we had while you were all chatting, was that this needs to have a regional focus. You know, we are talking about the city, I've said the city a few times, but really is about our region and the many cores across our region. So as a principal, thank you for bringing us back to that.
There was a group of 4 of us that formed a mini circle here, and we ran through a whole raft of concepts which I thought were really worth bringing to the group. And it did come from the concept of something that does happen in Montreal as well. Thank you, Quebec. Things like trying to orchestrate school trips so the kids all across the province get to see Ontario Place. Orchestrate a series of cinema shows such that it shows the province, but it also shows the technology. Exposing others outside of Toronto to Ontario Place through things like music festivals, art festivals, food festivals, plays on the lawn. For example, we have Shakespeare in the Park. Why can't we do a series of plays which are homegrown plays that might actually be new works that people within our city, our province, our country are actually writing, and then we perform them? That could be a project. Collective hosting programs, in the sense of people who come from a distance may not necessarily be able to afford to have their own their whole family stay in a hotel. How can we figure out ways in which we can maximize, this is me riffing off of my own thoughts here, and you know, connecting people to affordable hotels, affordable restaurants, maybe setting up programs where some of these get together and collectively offer to family groups a way of doing it affordably. And the other point that we try to make is that Ontario Place is a space where you can get close to nature. How often do people get close to nature? And one of the thoughts that I have is I'd really love to see our First Nations peoples giving their story, having a space, creating maybe events, powwows happening right on Ontario Place, such that it happens on their land. And the one final point that we talked about was accessibility to Ontario Place. There is that bridge, but it can be a bit challenging. So maybe we need to look at how we actually make sure that accessibility is really easy and convenient.
Awesome, wow, what a wonderful conversation. Thank you. So I'm Lane Hinton. I'm one of the artistic directors of the In Future Festival that's happened come up a few times. And so I've spent a considerable amount of time fairly recently on the West Island of Ontario Place. And through that project and during the time on that site, we realized one of the magical elements of it was actually something the public didn't see, which is the months leading up to the festival where artists were on site. Like Patricia was saying, it's a super exciting space. Artists are excited by it, and it really sort of felt like a residency or studio space. And so one of the things that we would love to see happen on site, which can happen in conjunction with so many other ideas because it is really flexible, is seeing the spaces that are already there and in the interim on a temporary basis used for artist residencies, artist studios, and then presenting those projects to the public in the park space and using it as a really exciting jumping off point for studio practices. The other thing that we were just talking about as well is thinking about the year-round use of the site. I think we often think about the fair weather days, but what about winter at Ontario Place? It's also a really interesting site in the winter. We spent a lot of time walking around with artists in the middle of January and February a few years ago, and there's huge ice formations, and it's a really interesting sort of desolate winter landscape. So one of my personal dreams with that
is to see a sauna complex at the island.
Oh, yeah.
Family friendly,
Ooh la la.
not a bougie spa. We're talking like family friendly, Nordic style. Let's jump in Lake Ontario. Let's go in the sauna and make you sweat in winter as well. Yep.
Great idea. We're gonna go back and then up to the front here. So all the way, do we have one in the back?
Okay, sorry. Our little group just came up with an odd idea about perhaps a world-renowned research facility that would attract world scientists and public research into the Great Lakes facilities so that perhaps we could inform and update the public as well as the world on what we can do moving forward to produce a facility that would not only utilize our University of Toronto, our wonderful facility, as well as our colleges and our youth who are now concerned about their environment. So I think maybe a 24/7, 365-day-a-year research facility could be a nice opportunity for the area as well.
Thank you. I think we're coming to the top right, my right, your left, and then there's a gentleman in the middle, and then we're back at the front.
Thank you very much. We had a great trio here discussing Ontario Place. Let me say first, the local democracy that's working today is something that should be an Ontario Place every day in its future. This is so exciting. We talked about accessibility as well, but one of the conclusions we came to was keep it simple. You don't have to have a subway connecting everything. Keep it simple.
Yeah.
You can get people here in different ways with buses, with trolleys, whatever it happens to be, but just get access. We also talked about using the existing resources in Toronto particularly and sharing them and rotating them through Ontario Place as a central hub, whether it's the museum, whether it's the art gallery, whether it's the science center. Doesn't really matter. It's just another access for people to gain a piece of Ontario. The other thing was access is about not just physical, but it should be about virtual access as well. How could Ontario Place connect itself to the broader place of Ontario and indeed Canada, if not international, from a virtual perspective? And finally, I think you've got to make sure that you keep the name Ontario in Ontario Place. And that means finding a way to get the people in the rest of Ontario to join in this particular crusade. And to do that is perhaps looking at a virtual Ontario Virtual Commons, or not virtual, Ontario Village Common, where people from Kenora, they have something. They have people from Ingersoll, it doesn't really matter, Kingston, Nipissing. There's something there that when they come, they feel it's theirs.
Is there anything in the back?
I'll jump up. My big concern coming down here today, I do see Joe Cressy, Adam Vaughan. It's good to see people. I don't know who is here from the provincial government that is currently involved. And that is the dark cloud that looms over everything here today. And we have a government that slogan is for the people, but do they really want to hear from the people? And so when you say it's democracy in action, but it was good to share ideas. Bo had something along the lines of a music. I had thought of that. Why not a hall of popular Ontario culture? And you only have to think of the current crop at the very top of the world. Drake, Bieber, Shawn Mendes, Alessia Cara. That's just currently today. You look back to Neil Young, Gordon Lightfoot, Alanis Morissette, Shania Twain. Surely to inspire the children of today, have a place where you say bring the buses down, that they could see and experience the greatness that has been achieved from this province and the people from the people. And, Bo had something very nice, respected the pods. It wasn't overpowering. My concern is that it's just going to be some mega piece of garbage dumped in there, all glitz and gaudy, and it has to respect what is currently there. And that Bo had a nice thing. You ran by Everhart Center, and you didn't kick you out. So very good. Enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm Robert. I'm from Etobicoke. And I'm quite sure that we have a lot of fabulous ideas here today. only scratching the surface of what could be down at Ontario Place. The greatest resource in the future, I'm quite confident, is going to be water. And Ontario Place, of course, is ideally located, and the project that has been a part of our history, which is still Ontario Place, very innovative, and unfortunately, like things like the agro-aero and everything, ideas always seem to get squashed. Now I've known, and I'm not going to get too political, but I'm certainly living in Etobicoke. I've known the Ford family for over 30 years, and we have a problem, major problem. And what we have to do in this room is, we do not need to be dictated to what is going to happen. We should be telling them. We're the taxpayers. So, just in conclusion, we can come up with some fabulous ideas. I know it's going to happen, and it's great, it should continue. But we have one overwhelming factor that we have to take into account first. And enough damage has been done. This guy is not finished, and I'm sorry, but we need to take back control.
Hi there, my name is Mark. I'm living in the city and found Ontario Place again after many years. I actually managed to find him and ride my bike in there and have a look around. And I'm loving everything that people are saying here, but it occurs to me that it needs to be a year-round neighborhood. Mm-hmm. How do you do that? And I may be treading on thin ice, but I wrote a little article called Wading In and Floating an Idea. What if you were to have people living there year-round, not on the land, but in the water, on the water, houseboats? What if you even brought, for affordable housing or some kind of housing, you even got an old cruise ship that had kind of seen its days, and you parked it down there. You have people living there year-round, and then they need office space, they need restaurants, they need a clubhouse, and then it becomes a neighborhood, and it's a cool place to be. The thing about Toronto is that we've got all sorts of cool neighborhoods, and we like to visit them at different parts of the year because there's a street fest going on. And I just think if we can have people living there, that it becomes lively, it becomes vibrant, and all of these artistic ventures and music festivals and things just get even better for people living there. That's my opinion.
Hi.
So there's, sorry, if you hold a second, this lady in the middle, and then this lady at the front. Don't hate us, they're cutting us off. We could be here for days, but 3 o'clock, we gotta bounce, so not everyone, 3:30. Lady in the middle?
But we have to bounce by 3, so we gotta hand it off. So 2 more stories. We have one there and one up here.
Okay, okay, fine. So first thing is a vision that I would love to see perhaps at Ontario Place is something, has anybody been to Art Park in Lewiston, New York? Just me? Okay. So that was a family destination when I was a kid. It is what it sounds like, art in the park. They don't have the benefit of the water, so that is something amazing year-round to build on for Ontario Place. Another thing, and it's come up a few times, and I just want to, how many people here today do not live within the city of Toronto, Etobicoke, or Scarborough? That's what I thought. Okay, so, oh, yay, okay. So it's come up before, yes, the rest of Ontario needs physical representation at Ontario Place because it's in the title, it is Ontario Place. But what we need for this fight, and I hate to use the word fight, we need to engage the rest of Ontario to get involved because it's Ontario Place. So if it just becomes a Toronto-centric argument, we're just going to be Toronto whining again.
So, point taken, very good point. One last.
We've got one story.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just share this quickly. I know we're running out of time. I know you asked us to think about who's not represented, who needs a space. And I want to talk about, again, families and children. In 2015, 2016, my team, not-for-profits, we launched a children's museum pilot project in Toronto called the Children's Discovery Center, which some of you may or may not remember. The purpose of the pilot project was to prove that there is this underserved market and a need for something for children. There's over 200 children's museums across North America, and for some odd reason, Toronto doesn't have one, even though we're the biggest city in the country. And what we found in our pilot project, we had over 17,000 families visit, and interestingly, 40% of them came from the 905 and beyond. They were coming and driving to our 20,000 square foot children's museum. It was located actually just beside Liberty Village at Vaughan and East Liberty Street, just up the street from Ontario Place. And what we really learned was that the whole philosophy of our place was open-ended, unstructured, free play. This was not a place where kids came to be entertained. It was like the original Ontario Place. It was interactive, it was organic. It was a place where kids and family came. So last year, in response to the previous government's RFP, our team, a consortium of not-for-profit organizations, we actually put together a formal proposal in response to the previous RFP for the redevelopment of the West Island, which included a permanent children's museum, as well as, actually coincidentally, a lot of the ideas that have been brought up here today. We also had a ton of ideas. So it's a really comprehensive plan we came up with. It included bringing back the Children's Village that I spoke to about earlier, and putting the first adventure playground in Toronto at an Ontario Place, creating a youth adventure park. We had a First Nations Cultural Experience Center that we were thinking about, a swimming hole and skating pond. We're thinking of creating an Ontario Place Archive Center to actually archive and all the history of the city, keeping the Cinesphere, and also, most importantly, keeping Ontario Place completely open, all the current paths and beaches and parks, and keeping it accessible. So again, I just want to throw that in there, that there are other possibilities that we explored as a team a bit further than just talking today, and that is an underserved market that we
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So just very quickly to the non-Toronto focused hashtag ON Place for All, Ontario Place for All is trending nationally. Woo! Nationally. So this is important to this country and to this province. I'm going to switch over to my partner, Cronin.
And two or three really quick things before we pass it back off to the organizers. The West End Phoenix posted the question that we just asked, and their Twitter feed is just a waterfall of ideas. I thought about that before I said it. That wasn't spontaneous. And there's a ton of ideas on their Twitter feed, so go check it out. What's the handle? At West End Phoenix. Okay, so check that out. Just a conversation that was brought to us by someone who had to leave, and just builds on what was said about this being a national conversation. Let's think of the multiple cores, even just in the city. We think a lot about, what's serving what's around us right now, but someone sort of brought to our attention there's another core on the west side of the city that needs to be served. And the last thing I'll just say is, I just think this is a really good signal in the noise for us to just be looking around at the other things we want to be proactive about. I know today feels a little bit reactive and there's a sense of urgency, and you should stick around till 3:30 because we're going to be talking really specifically about what needs to get done in the next few weeks. But I just think now, to Robert's comment earlier, let's just look around and look at the things that we just want to hold up and take care of, as we have a government that seems to be dismantling a whole bunch of things that we really care about. So let's be a little bit more proactive about all the other things around us. Ontario Place is super important, but also some of the other things in your neighborhood and your communities that you might want to safeguard. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Karen. Thank you for guiding our conversations, and thank you all for your ideas and input. One quick housekeeping note: Karen mentioned to me she's lost her water bottle somewhere floating around. Yay, we have a winner back there.
Thank you. Trust.
As Zara mentioned, we've got a few minutes left. We will get to that for sure. And we're into the critical part of the discussion of the so what part. So we've had some great ideas. We've had the points raised that the government is thinking about a new vision for the Ontario Place, and wheels are in motion. So we're going to have to be as quickly into motion. So some of the people that we all worked with us to help set this up today, we had this idea of sort of starting a new group called Ontario Place for All, because people were all here and we believe that Ontario Place should be for everyone. So it would be an informal group that would pull together and drive an agenda of putting a positive vision forward for Ontario Place, and pull all the ideas that we've got together here. Park people can assist with that. We can be a backbone for that organization. We can help create websites, social media, be pushing and helping with their strategies and discussions as this all comes together. So we're thinking about putting this together right away, literally today almost sort of being the launch of that organization. If you've got some skills or particular things that you think you can help bring to that organization, we'd love to help you be involved. If you've got some specific ideas that we could be following up on as we're breaking up, come on up to the front, give us your emails, give us your contact information, give us those specific ideas. We are going to have a holding page up very quickly for our website. We are going to be making it very easy for you to be contacting with us and to be giving us your ideas so that you can be part of this, because we're going to need some money to help keep us going. If you've got some donations, we've got the wonderful pails right there. As you're on your way out, it can really make a difference for us just to get things like social media and websites and all those things up and going right away. Yeah. Well, there's that, but also that's, and I'll speak so related to that. So you can go to the Park People website and donate, get in touch with Dr. Donation to Park People for Ontario Place, just mark Ontario Place for All on it, and that'll really help too. But we also need you to be talking to your neighbors, so spreading the word about this. We'll be contacting you again. Make sure that we've got your contact information before you leave, because we're going to need everybody to be involved in this. We're going to need your energy and ideas. And just to, to make all this work. Over to Suzanne.
Great, thanks, Dave. So just to add on to this, when you leave us your name and you want to volunteer, the next piece we'd like is to be able to read that information and your email. But the next step is tell us what your strength is, because we need to be very nimble, not to get sort of nasty about this, but we know that there's going to be something happening and it's going to be fast, and we're going to be strategic and as nimble as we can. So stay in touch, start telling 2 friends and so on. We're going to need a large groundswell. And so one of the things we talked about is we have to talk to our friends up north. And the analogy I used is, how would you feel if you sold Algonquin Park? So this is the reverse.
Think of the ideas.
Right, and so someone just mentioned quickly, the boat show's coming up, so we should be there to start trolling. Yeah, exactly, okay. So now, I mentioned earlier, my friends promised a 1-minute manager. Before we do that, I wanted to acknowledge that Julie DeBruzen is in the house. Do not ask about her arm. She is fine. She is fine. Julie is our MP from Toronto Danforth. So first up is our MP for Spadina Fort York, Adam Vaughan.
Thank you very much. And thank you to the organizers who have brought together such a great group of people to fight for the waterfront again. Look, there isn't a substantial federal interest on this project, but there is an interest for all Torontonians, and that makes it a federal issue. And the issue is this: it's very simple. Water is a right, and it's a right for Torontonians to access, but it's a human right in order for our survival on this planet. And I think that this is fundamental to the way in which we go forward in this century. There will be no issue that defines our success more than water. If you don't manage it properly, it manages you. So drought, storm, flood, you name it, the impact that uncontrolled and climate change driven water policy is going to have on this part of the world is just going to be absolutely phenomenal. And so we have to get it right. And I think it starts by getting it right on the waterfront in Toronto for those of us who live in the city, and making sure that Ontario Place is the place where we stake our claim to make sure we manage water, both the access to it, but also our response to it in the most responsible, creative, but ecologically sustainable way possible. Selling this off as real estate, which is effectively Doug Ford's only trick. The TTC is about real estate. Ontario Place is about real estate. If you thought it through, Algonquin Park would be too. But Ford has promised to cut taxes. He's promised to balance the budget without cutting services, and he's not going to borrow money. He's going to sell everything he can get his hands on and sell it not necessarily for the best price either. As we've seen with other parts of the waterfront already, we have to keep Ontario Place in public hands. We have to establish the principle of access to water is a right for all Torontonians. And then I think one of the best ideas I've heard is this notion of studying water and its impact in Ontario, whether it's up north with the floods or down south with the storms, whatever the issue is. I think we can use Ontario Place to protect our water for the future, and in doing so, be true to the Indigenous groups of this part of the world where water keepers are still under claim. That is a bit of a federal issue, but make sure that the Indigenous stewardship of water is also brought to bear and we can start to be partners on that front. And this is, I think, the fight for the waterfront for this place that we call Ontario Place. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Adam. You ready? Chris Glover, our MPP for Spadina Fort York.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. And I want to give a big round of applause to the organizers because this is a phenomenal afternoon. So I just want to ask you a quick question. How many of you have told somebody in the last year or two that you're Canadian? Raise your hand. Okay, almost everyone. How many of you in the last year or two have told somebody that you're an Ontarian? A few, right? And this is the big thing. Like, we in Ontario, we do not celebrate our heritage. We do not celebrate our province. And that was the original vision of John Robarts and Bill Davis when they were creating Ontario Place. They wanted to celebrate this province because we often take it for granted. We don't talk about and we don't boast enough about this incredible land that we live on. And, you know, we've got, in the south here, we've got the Great Lakes lowlands, that beautiful rolling farmland. We've got our dynamic cities in the south. We've got the stark beauty of the Canadian Shield through most of the province. And then if you've never been to it, I highly recommend the wilderness around James Bay, the James Bay lowlands, also incredible. And I heard people talking about the need to celebrate all of this province, to make sure that Ontario Place is a place where everybody from everywhere in this province wants to come and sees their part of Ontario reflected. And I think that's a really important part of this visioning process going forward. And so I want to thank again the organizers for starting us off. This is the model. This is how you create a vision for Ontario Place. You have public consultations like this one. And so this is just the first step. Thank you again very much for organizing this today.
Well done. Next up is our councillor for Spadina Fort York, Joe Cressy.
Well, listen, Ontario Place belongs to all Ontarians, right? Ontario Place is not and should not be for sale, and it shouldn't be. The future of Ontario Place should not and cannot be decided in Doug Ford's back rooms. And so there is a history here. There is a history of Doug Ford going after the waterfront. He wanted to rip up the plans in the Portland, you'll recall, with the Ferris wheel. They wanted to put jets at the Island Airport. They wanted to bring a casino to downtown Toronto. That's his history. But there's also a people's history of fighting back. When they came after the Portlands, Code Blue was formed and you fought back and won. When they went after jets at the Island Airport, No Jets TO was formed and you fought back and you won. And when they wanted a casino in downtown Toronto, No Casino Toronto was formed and you fought back and you won. And so here today we're at the founding meeting of Ontario Place for All. And so today we start a citizens' people's movement right across this province where people fight back and we win. And I want to tell you briefly that the City of Toronto will be with you, behind your back. Next week we will formally kick off an Ontario Place subcommittee, which will be a formal subcommittee of the Toronto and East York District, which I'll be chairing, and we'll be there with you. And I also want to tell you, the City of Toronto, we own part of the land in Ontario Place. We don't talk about it, but you want to get from the land to the islands, you cross the water line. We own that. And so if we end up having to sit in that water to defend Ontario Place, we will. Let's get going. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. That's a great way to end it. Thank you for elected representatives coming. Thank you for all your ideas. We really appreciate it. As Joe said, this is a start. We are going to win. We are going to get that vision we all want for Ontario Place. Thank you again. In the meantime, get out to Ontario Place, enjoy it. We need your donations as you're going out the door. Oh, and right here, it's going to be up and running almost like hopefully today, Ontario Place for All. It'll be our virtual hub to bring everyone together, move those ideas forward. So again, thank you everyone, and we look forward to all working together for the Ontario Place we want. Thanks.
Thank you. An update on the Humber baseline.